morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Premier Real Estate Solutions, casting long, golden rays across the marble floor. David Johnson walked through the front door of his company, coffee in hand, with that familiar feeling of pride washing over him. After 15 years of building this business from nothing, he still got excited walking into his own office. "Morning, honey," his wife Lisa called out from behind the reception desk, where she was reviewing some paperwork. Even though they owned the place, Lisa never missed a Saturday morning at the office. She believed in being hands-on with their business, just like they'd been since day one when they started with a tiny rented space and big dreams. "Beautiful day for house hunting," David said, setting his coffee down and wrapping his arms around his wife from behind. "You ready for this adventure?" Lisa laughed, the kind of warm laugh that made David fall in love with her all over again. "I still can't believe we're doing this. Going to look at houses like regular buyers when we own one of the biggest real estate companies in the city." Their 17-year-old daughter Maya bounced through the door, car keys jingling in her hand. "Are we really going to pretend we're not rich?" she asked with a grin. "Because I've been practicing my 'we're just looking' face all week." David chuckled. Maya had inherited his sense of humor and Lisa's sharp business mind. She was already talking about joining the family business after college, though they'd told her she needed to work somewhere else first to learn the industry from a different perspective. "The whole point is to see how our agents treat regular customers," Lisa explained, pulling up the listing on her tablet. "We want the full experience. No special treatment, no shortcuts through the process." The house they were going to see was stunning. A $2.8 million contemporary masterpiece in Oakwood Hills, complete with a pool, home theater, and a kitchen that looked like something out of a magazine. David had driven by it twice this week, and each time he could picture his family living there. "Plus," David added, "we haven't bought a house as regular customers in 15 years. It'll be fun to remember what it's like from the other side." Lisa pulled up their agent's profile on the computer. "Katie Reynolds," she read. "She's been with us for about 3 months. Came highly recommended from the Douglas Group downtown. Her sales numbers have been solid so far." "Have we met her?" Maya asked, looking over her mother's shoulder at the screen. "Not yet," David replied. "We were at that conference in Denver when she started. Jennifer in HR handled all the interviews and onboarding." Lisa nodded. "Her background check was clean, great references, and she passed all our training modules with flying colors. On paper, she looks perfect." David felt good about their hiring process. They'd worked hard to build a company culture based on respect, professionalism, and treating every client like family. Their training program was extensive, covering everything from market analysis to customer service to fair housing laws. Every agent had to complete 40 hours of training before they could show their first house. "So what's our story?" Maya asked. "Are we the Smiths, the Browns? Ooh, can we be the Diamonds? That sounds fancy." "We're the Johnsons," Lisa said firmly. "We're not lying about who we are. We're just not announcing that we own the company." David pulled out his phone and showed them the appointment confirmation. "I booked us under my regular name. David Johnson, interested in the Oakwood Hills property, budget up to $3 million. Everything legitimate." The plan was simple. They'd meet Katie at the house, tour it like any other potential buyers, and see how the process worked from start to finish. David was curious about how their agents handled initial meetings, how they presented properties, and whether they followed all the company protocols he and Lisa had spent years developing. "Think she'll try to upsell us?" Maya wondered aloud. "I hope she does," Lisa said. "That's what good agents do. They listen to what clients want, and then show them properties that might work even better." David looked at his watch. They had about an hour before the appointment. "Want to grab breakfast first? There's that new place on 5th Street that's supposed to be amazing." "Can't," Lisa said, holding up a stack of contracts. "I need to review these before Monday, but you two go ahead." Maya shook her head. "I want to help Mom. Besides, I'm too nervous to eat. What if this house is perfect? What if it's not? What if Katie turns out to be weird?" David laughed. "She won't be weird. We have excellent hiring standards." "Famous last words," Maya muttered, but she was smiling. Lisa gathered her papers and headed toward David's office. I'll meet you guys at the house. Don't start the tour without me. Wouldn't dream of it, David called after her. The truth was, David was more excited about this house hunt than he'd been about anything in months. Running a successful real estate company was rewarding, but it had been years since he'd felt that thrill of walking through a potential new home, imagining his family's life unfolding in those rooms. Maya flopped into one of the leather chairs in the lobby. Dad, can I ask you something? Always. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you and Mom had stayed working for other people instead of starting your own company? David sat down across from her. It was a question he'd asked himself many times over the years. Honestly, I think we would have been fine. Your mom and I are hard workers. We would have made good livings, had nice houses, taken good vacations. But, Maya prompted, but we never would have had the freedom to build something exactly the way we wanted it. We never would have been able to hire people who share our values or create the kind of workplace where people actually want to come to work every day. Maya nodded thoughtfully. Is that why you're so picky about who you hire? Part of it. But mostly I've learned that your reputation is everything in this business. One bad agent can undo years of good work. One person who doesn't treat clients right can destroy relationships that took decades to build. No pressure on Katie then, Maya said with a grin. David checked his phone again. Speaking of Katie, we should probably head out. Traffic might be heavy and I don't want to be late for our own appointment. Maya grabbed her purse and headed for the door. This is either going to be really fun or really educational. Why not both? David said, following her out into the perfect Saturday morning sunshine. As they drove toward Oakwood Hills, David felt that familiar mix of excitement and nervousness that came with any big decision. Buying a new house was always a leap of faith, even when you understood the market better than almost anyone. But more than that, he was looking forward to experiencing his own company's service from the customer's perspective. It had been too long since he'd sat in the passenger seat instead of the driver's seat, so to speak. You know what I hope? Maya said as they pulled into the driveway of the stunning contemporary house. What's that? I hope Katie is everything you guys think she is. I hope this whole experience reminds you why you love this business so much. David smiled, parking behind a silver sedan that must belong to their agent. Through the windshield, he could see Lisa's car pulling up behind them. Me too, kiddo. Me too. Katie Reynolds checked her watch for the third time as she stood in the grand foyer of the Oakwood Hills property. The Johnson family was supposed to arrive at 11, and it was already 5 minutes past. She hated when clients were late, especially for high-end properties like this one. Time was money, and she had 2 other showings scheduled for the afternoon. Her phone buzzed with a text from her colleague Brad. How's the showing going with the Johnsons? Big commission if they bite? Katie rolled her eyes. Brad always assumed every client was ready to buy immediately. In her experience, most people needed to see at least 5 or 6 properties before making a decision, especially at this price point. She heard car doors slamming outside and walked to the large front window. A well-dressed black family was approaching the house. A man in his early 40s wearing khakis and a button-down shirt, a woman about the same age in a stylish blazer and jeans, and a teenage girl who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. Katie's stomach dropped slightly. In her 3 months at Premier Real Estate Solutions, she'd learned that the Oakwood Hills neighborhood was very particular about its residents. The Homeowners Association had very specific standards, and she'd heard whispered conversations about maintaining property values and neighborhood character. She opened the front door and forced her brightest smile. The Johnson family, I presume. That's us, the man said, extending his hand. David Johnson, this is my wife Lisa and our daughter Maya. Katie shook hands with each of them, noting their firm grips and direct eye contact. They certainly seemed professional enough, but appearances could be deceiving. She'd had clients before who looked the part but couldn't actually afford the properties they wanted to see. Welcome to 1247 Maple Ridge Drive, Katie said, stepping back to let them into the foyer. I have to say this is one of our most exclusive listings. The current owners are very selective about who they're willing to sell to. David raised an eyebrow. Selective how? Oh, you know, Katie said vaguely. They want to make sure the new owners will fit well into the neighborhood community. Oakwood Hills has a very specific culture. Lisa and David exchanged a glance that Katie didn't quite catch. Maya, meanwhile, was staring up at the impressive chandelier hanging above them. "This place is huge," Maya said. "How many square feet?" 4,200, Katie replied automatically. Though I should mention up front that properties in this price range typically require substantial down payments. "Have you been pre-approved for financing?" "Yes," David said simply. "We have a letter from our bank." Katie waited for him to offer more details, but he didn't. Most clients were eager to talk about their financial situation, especially when they were trying to prove they could afford a property. The silence made her slightly uncomfortable. "Well," she said, "let's start with the living room. Though I should warn you, the monthly homeowners association fees here are quite steep. Almost $800 a month. That's on top of property taxes, which run about $12,000 annually." She led them into the spacious living room with its soaring ceilings and wall of windows overlooking the backyard. It really was a beautiful space, she had to admit. The afternoon light streaming through the windows made everything glow. "The current owners had this room professionally designed," Katie continued. "Of course, you'd probably want to redecorate to suit your own tastes." "What makes you think that?" Lisa asked. Katie felt her cheeks warm slightly. "Oh, I just meant, well, everyone has different styles, you know? Different preferences." Maya had wandered over to the windows and was looking out at the pool and landscaped backyard. "Mom, Dad, come look at this view." David and Lisa joined their daughter at the windows. Katie watched them take in the outdoor space, noting how they pointed out different features to each other. They seemed genuinely interested, which was good. But she'd learned not to get her hopes up too early in the process. "The pool was just resurfaced last year," Katie said, "though maintenance can be expensive. The pool service alone runs about $200 a month." "That's reasonable," David said. "We had a pool at our last house." Katie made a mental note. "So they'd owned property before, and apparently something with a pool." That was encouraging. Maybe they had more money than she'd initially thought. "Shall we see the kitchen?" she suggested. The kitchen was truly spectacular. Granite countertops, stainless steel appliances, a large island with seating for 6. Katie had shown this house a dozen times, and the kitchen always impressed potential buyers. "Now this is gorgeous," Lisa said, running her hand along the smooth countertop. "Maya, look at this pantry. It's bigger than your bedroom." "Haha, Mom," Maya replied, but she was smiling as she explored the space. Katie watched them examine the appliances and peer into cabinets. Most families who couldn't afford a house like this were intimidated by kitchens this elaborate. They'd make comments about how they'd never use half the features or how it seemed too fancy for regular cooking, but the Johnsons seemed comfortable in the space. "The refrigerator and wine cooler are included in the sale," Katie mentioned, though I should point out that the utility bills for a house this size can be substantial. Last winter, the owner's heating bill was over $400 a month. "Energy costs are definitely something to consider," David agreed. "What kind of heating system?" "High-efficiency gas," Katie replied. "But even with that, a house this size just uses a lot of energy." They moved through the dining room, which Katie noted could seat 12 people comfortably, though she wondered aloud whether the Johnsons did much entertaining. The family room was next, with its stone fireplace and built-in entertainment center. "This is where the current owners spend most of their time," Katie said, "though the HOA has strict rules about noise levels, especially in the evenings. This neighborhood values peace and quiet." "That's good to know," Lisa said. "We're not party people anyway." Katie led them upstairs to see the bedrooms. The master suite was impressive with its sitting area, walk-in closets, and spa-like bathroom. Maya immediately claimed the bedroom with the best natural light, while David and Lisa examined the master bathroom's features. "The sellers are including most of the window treatments," Katie said. "Custom blinds and curtains can be very expensive to replace." She found herself constantly mentioning costs and expenses, though she wasn't entirely sure why. Usually she tried to downplay the financial aspects until clients expressed serious interest. But something about this showing felt different. Her phone buzzed with another text from Brad. "Don't spend too long if they're not serious buyers." "I've got a client coming in who's pre-approved for $5 million, Katie quickly typed back. "Still showing. We'll update later. Is everything okay?" David asked, noticing her distraction with the phone. "Oh yes, just coordinating my afternoon schedule," Katie said. I have several other families interested in this property, so there might be some competition if you decide you want to make an offer. How many other families? Maya asked. Katie hesitated. Actually, the Johnsons were the only showing she had scheduled for this house this weekend. But creating a sense of urgency was a standard sales technique. A few, she said vaguely. The market is very competitive right now, especially for properties in this neighborhood. They finished the upstairs tour and headed back down to see David's potential home office and the 3-car garage. Katie noticed that the family seemed to genuinely appreciate the house's features. They asked good questions about everything from the roof age to the HVAC system to the neighborhood schools. Maya would be able to finish her senior year at Oakwood High, Lisa mentioned. That's supposed to be an excellent school. It is, Katie agreed. Though I should mention that the school district is very established. It might take some time to fit in. David stopped walking and turned to look at Katie directly. What do you mean by that? Katie felt suddenly flustered. Oh, just that any new family takes time to adjust to a new community. You know how it is. But as soon as the words left her mouth, she realized how they might have sounded. The Johnsons were all looking at her with expressions she couldn't quite read. Of course, Lisa said quietly. Change is always an adjustment. The rest of the tour continued in a slightly different atmosphere. Katie found herself talking more quickly, trying to fill the silence that seemed to have settled over the group. She pointed out practical features like the laundry room and storage spaces, but her earlier easy confidence had somehow evaporated. As they walked back toward the front door, Katie's phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID and saw it was another agent from her old company. I'm so sorry, she said to the Johnsons. I need to take this quickly. She stepped a few feet away and answered. Hello, Rebecca. Katie. How are you settling in at the new place? Fine, Katie said, aware that the Johnson family was still within earshot. Listen, I'm with clients right now. Oh, sorry. I just wanted to see if you'd heard about the Peterson listing. Apparently, they specifically requested a white agent. Can you believe that? I told my broker there's no way we'd take a listing with those kinds of restrictions. Katie's blood went cold. She glanced over at the Johnsons, who were examining a piece of artwork on the wall, but were definitely close enough to have heard Rebecca's comment. I have to go, Katie said quickly, ending the call. When she turned back to the family, their body language had completely changed. David's jaw was set in a hard line. Lisa's arms were crossed and Maya looked upset. So, David said in a carefully controlled voice, what did you think of the house overall? Katie scrambled to regain her professional composure. It's a wonderful property. Perfect for a family looking for space and luxury. A family like what? Lisa asked quietly. I just meant a family that appreciates quality, Katie said, but even she could hear how weak it sounded. The showing was clearly over. As they walked toward the front door, Katie realized she'd somehow managed to turn what should have been a straightforward house tour into something that felt tense and uncomfortable. I'll be in touch about next steps, David said as they reached their cars. Of course, Katie replied. And if you have any other questions about the neighborhood or the community, please don't hesitate to call. As she watched the Johnson family drive away, Katie had the sinking feeling that she'd somehow blown what could have been a significant sale. But she couldn't quite put her finger on what had gone wrong. The tension in the car was thick as the Johnson family sat in the circular driveway, processing what had just happened during their house tour. Maya was the first to break the silence. Did I imagine that, or was she being really weird? Maya asked from the back seat. All those comments about fitting in and the neighborhood character? David gripped the steering wheel tighter. In 15 years of running a real estate business, he'd heard plenty of coded language, but experiencing it as a customer felt completely different. You didn't imagine it. Lisa was staring back at the house, her mind racing. The constant mentions of costs, the questions about our financing, the phone call about clients requesting white agents. This is exactly the kind of behavior we train our people to avoid. Should we go back in and say something? Maya asked. Not yet, David said. Let's see how this plays out. Before anyone could respond further, Katie appeared at David's car window looking flustered. She tapped gently on the glass. David rolled down the window. Yes? I'm so sorry, Katie began, but I just gotta see. All from another client. They're very interested in this property and want to schedule an immediate showing. Would it be possible for you to wrap up here? I know we didn't get to see the basement storage area, but I could email you some photos. Lisa leaned forward from the passenger seat. We had an hour scheduled. It's only been 40 minutes. Katie's smile looked forced. I understand and I apologize for the inconvenience. But this other family has been looking for months and they're pre-approved for well above asking price. I'm sure you understand how the business works. David felt his wife's hand touch his arm, a warning to stay calm. Actually, I'm not sure I do understand. Could you explain how the business works? Katie's cheeks flushed. Well, it's just that when you have serious buyers who are ready to move quickly, you have to prioritize. Time is money in real estate. And we're not serious buyers. Maya piped up from the back seat. Katie glanced at Maya, then back at David. I didn't say that. I just mean that some clients are further along in the process than others. David's phone started ringing. He glanced down and saw it was his business partner calling about another matter. But Katie seemed to take this as confirmation of something. See? Katie said, gesturing toward his phone. Everyone's busy. I'm just trying to be efficient with everyone's time. David declined the call and looked back at Katie. So you're saying we should leave so you can show the house to more qualified buyers? I wouldn't put it exactly like that, Katie said, but her tone suggested that was exactly what she meant. Lisa unbuckled her seatbelt. Actually, I'd like to see the basement storage area you mentioned. We're still within our scheduled time. Katie's expression shifted to barely concealed annoyance. Mrs. Johnson, I really don't think the basement storage is going to be relevant for your family's needs. Why is that? Lisa asked pointedly. Well, it's very spacious, more than most families need, and the maintenance requirements for a basement that size can be overwhelming. David had heard enough. He turned off the car engine. We'd like to complete our tour, please. Katie looked like she wanted to argue but seemed to realize she'd painted herself into a corner. Of course, but I do need to ask that we move quickly. As they walked back toward the house, Katie's phone rang again. She answered it without asking for permission to step away from the family. Hello, Jennifer, Katie said loudly enough that the Johnsons couldn't help but overhear. Yes, I'm still with those people I told you about. No, they're not what we expected either. David, Lisa, and Maya all stopped walking and turned to stare at Katie, who had her back to them as she continued the conversation. I know, right? They seem nice enough, but you know how it is with this neighborhood. The HOA has very specific standards about who fits in here. Katie paused, listening to whoever was on the other end of the call. Exactly, she continued. I mean, I'm just trying to be realistic about their chances, even if they could afford it, which I'm not entirely convinced they can. The approval process here is pretty rigorous. Lisa grabbed David's arm. Maya looked like she was about to march over and snatch the phone away from Katie. Katie was still talking. I've got the Williams family coming at 2 o'clock. They're much more what the sellers have in mind. You know, established in the community, the right connections, that sort of thing. David had reached his limit. He walked over to where Katie was standing and cleared his throat loudly. Katie spun around, her eyes wide as she realized the family had heard everything. Jennifer, I'll call you back, she said quickly, ending the conversation. Is there something you'd like to share with us? David asked, his voice deadly calm. Katie's face went through several shades of red. That was about a different property. Not this one, really? Lisa said, joining her husband. Because it sounded like you were talking about us. No, that was completely unrelated, Katie insisted, but her voice was shaking. Maya stepped forward. You said those people in this neighborhood. You were definitely talking about us. Katie looked trapped. Look, I think there might be some misunderstanding here. I was just being honest about the realities of the market in this area. What realities? David asked. Katie took a deep breath, and for a moment it looked like she might actually explain herself honestly. Instead, she doubled down. This is a very exclusive neighborhood, she said, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. The residents here have worked hard to maintain a certain standard of living. They want to preserve the community they've built. And what kind of community is that? Lisa asked. Katie's mask was slipping completely now. A stable community. People who understand the values here. People who won't bring down property values or change the character of the neighborhood. The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Maya actually gasped. Are you saying we would bring down property values? David asked quietly. Katie seemed to realize she'd crossed a line, but instead of backing down, she kept going. I'm saying that the Homeowners Association takes these decisions very seriously. They look at factors like, well, like whether new residents will fit in with the existing community standards. Lisa laughed, but there was no humor in it. Community standards, right? Katie's phone rang again. This time she looked at the caller ID and her whole demeanor changed. Her voice became warm and enthusiastic. Hello, Mrs. Williams? Yes, absolutely. I can move your showing up to 1 o'clock. This property is perfect for your family. She walked a few steps away from the Johnsons but continued speaking loudly enough for them to hear every word. Oh yes, it's exactly what you're looking for. Beautiful neighborhood, excellent schools, and the kind of community where your children will thrive. I know you'll love it here. Katie paused, listening. Don't worry about that. I'm just finishing up with some people who aren't really serious buyers. They were just browsing, you know how it is. I'll have them cleared out well before you arrive. David felt Lisa's hand slip into his, squeezing tightly. Maya looked like she was about to cry. Katie ended the call and turned back to them with a bright smile that looked completely artificial. I'm so sorry, but I'm going to have to cut this short. The Williams family is very interested in making an offer today, and I need to prepare the property for their visit. Prepare it how? Maya asked, her voice thick with emotion. Katie's smile faltered. Well, just, make sure everything is perfect for serious buyers. David pulled out his phone and opened the voice recording app. Katie's eyes went wide when she saw what he was doing. What are you doing? She demanded. Documenting this conversation, David said calmly. For our records. You can't do that without my permission, Katie said, her voice rising in panic. Actually, in this state, I can record any conversation I'm part of, David replied. It's a one-party consent law. Katie reached for his phone. Delete that right now. David stepped back, keeping the phone away from her. I don't think so. I'm calling security, Katie threatened, pulling out her own phone. Please do, Lisa said. I'd love to explain to security why we're being asked to leave a house showing that we have an appointment for. Katie seemed to realize that calling security might not work out the way she hoped. Instead, she tried a different approach. Look, I think we all got off on the wrong foot here, she said, forcing her voice to sound reasonable. I'm just trying to do my job. This is a competitive market, and I have to manage multiple clients. By lying to them? Maya asked. I wasn't lying, Katie protested. I was being realistic about market conditions. David looked at his wife and daughter. The tour was clearly over and not in the way any of them had expected. We'll be in touch, David said finally. Katie looked confused. About the house? About everything, Lisa said quietly. As they walked back to their cars, Katie called after them. I hope you understand that I was just trying to help you avoid disappointment. Sometimes it's better to be honest about these things up front. David turned back one more time. You're absolutely right about being honest. I couldn't agree more. The look of confusion on Katie's face followed them all the way to their cars. The drive back to the Premier Real Estate Solutions office was mostly silent. Maya stared out the window while David and Lisa were each lost in their own thoughts about what had just happened. The weight of the situation was starting to sink in. I can't believe that just happened, Maya finally said as they pulled into the office parking lot. I mean, I've heard you guys talk about discrimination in real estate, but experiencing it firsthand was just horrible, Lisa finished. I know, sweetheart. David parked the car but didn't immediately get out. The worst part is this happened at our own company, with our own agent, using our own training materials and policies. They sat in the car for another moment, watching other weekend visitors come and go from the building. Premier Real Estate Solutions looked exactly the same as it had when they'd left that morning, but somehow everything felt different now. What are we going to do? Maya asked. I honestly don't know yet, David admitted. This isn't just about Katie's behavior. This is about our entire company culture. If this is happening with one agent, what else might be going on that we don't know about? Lisa pulled out her phone and started scrolling through emails. I'm looking at the customer satisfaction surveys from the past 3 months. Most of them are positive, but now I'm wondering if we missed something. David turned to face his wife and daughter. Before we do anything else, I need to ask you both something. Are you okay? Really okay? Because what happened back there was completely unacceptable, and I don't want either of you to think for 1 second that Katie's attitude was justified or normal. Maya nodded slowly. I'm okay. I mean, it sucked, but I'm okay. I just keep thinking about other families who might go through the same thing. What if they don't own the real estate company? What if they can't do anything about it? Lisa reached back and squeezed her daughter's hand. That's exactly why we have to handle this right. David's phone started ringing. He looked at the caller ID and saw it was Robert Chen, their head of HR. I should take this, David said, answering the call. Hey Robert, what's up? David, I'm glad I caught you. I just got a strange call from Katie Reynolds. She said there was some kind of incident with clients today, and she wanted to get ahead of any potential complaints. David and Lisa exchanged glances. What kind of incident did she describe? She said there was a misunderstanding with a family who seemed upset about standard market conditions. She claimed they might try to file a discrimination complaint, but she insisted it was all a big misunderstanding. David felt his anger rising again. Robert, can you come into the office? We need to talk. Sure, I can be there in 20 minutes. Is everything okay? We'll discuss it when you get here. After ending the call, David looked at his family. Katie called HR to get ahead of this. She's already trying to control the narrative. Of course she is, Lisa said grimly. Let's go inside and pull her file. I want to review everything. Her application, her references, her training records, everything. They walked into the building and headed straight for David's office. Lisa went to the HR files while David opened his computer to review Katie's employment documentation. Here's her application, Lisa said, spreading papers across David's desk. Previous experience at Douglas Realty. Good sales numbers, clean background check. David pulled up Katie's training records on his computer. She completed all the required courses. Fair housing laws, customer service protocols, company culture orientation. She even scored 90% on the final exam. Maya was reading over her mother's shoulder. Look at her references. They're all glowing. Professional, knowledgeable, excellent with clients. Either she's a completely different person than she was 3 months ago, or she's very good at hiding her true attitudes, David said. Lisa found Katie's signed acknowledgement of the company's anti-discrimination policies. She signed this form saying she understood and agreed to follow our zero-tolerance policy on discrimination. It's right here in black and white. Robert Chen arrived 20 minutes later looking concerned. David and Lisa had worked with Robert for over 5 years, and they trusted his judgment completely. Okay, Robert said, settling into a chair across from David's desk. Tell me what happened. David started from the beginning, describing their plan to tour the house as regular customers. Lisa jumped in to detail Katie's behavior during the showing. Maya provided her perspective as someone who had witnessed the entire interaction. Robert's expression grew more serious with each detail they shared. The phone calls were the worst part, Lisa said. She was talking about us like we were some kind of problem to be managed rather than legitimate clients. And when David started recording, she actually tried to grab his phone, Maya added. Robert shook his head. This is exactly the kind of situation our training is designed to prevent. Did you get everything on recording? David pulled out his phone and played back the audio from the final part of their interaction with Katie. Robert listened intently, his frown deepening with each sentence. This is bad, Robert said when the recording ended. Really bad. Not just from a legal standpoint, but from a moral one. This goes against everything we stand for as a company. Lisa leaned forward. Robert, I need you to be honest with us. Have there been any other complaints about Katie? Anything that might suggest this isn't an isolated incident? Robert was quiet for a long moment. There was one phone call about 3 weeks ago. A Hispanic family said they felt like their agent wasn't taking them seriously, but they didn't specifically mention discrimination. I followed up with Katie, and she said it was just a miscommunication about their budget range. Did you document it? David asked. I made a note in her file, but I didn't launch a formal investigation. The family didn't want to pursue it further, and Katie seemed genuinely confused about what had gone wrong. David felt sick. So this might not be the first time. We don't know for sure, Robert said carefully. But now I'm wondering if I should have dug deeper into that earlier complaint. Lisa stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the parking lot. This is our fault. We built this company. We hired her. We're responsible for her actions. Lisa, that's not fair to yourself, Robert said. You can't control every aspect of every employee's behavior. But we can create systems that catch problems before they get this far, David replied. And clearly our current systems aren't working. Maya had been quiet during this part of the conversation, but now she spoke up. What happens to Katie now? David looked at Robert. What are our options? Given the severity of what happened and the clear violation of company policy, termination is definitely warranted, Robert said. But we also need to think about the legal implications. This could easily become a lawsuit against the company. What about the legal implications for other families who might have experienced the same treatment? Lisa asked. If Katie has been doing this with other clients, we could be liable for a pattern of discrimination. Robert nodded grimly. That's why we need to conduct a thorough review of all her client interactions. Phone records, email communications, feedback forms, everything. David's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced down and saw it was from an unknown number. Mr. Johnson, this is Katie Reynolds. I hope we can resolve the misunderstanding from today's showing. I'd like to schedule a meeting to clarify what happened. I think there was a communication breakdown that we can fix. David showed the message to Lisa and Robert. She still doesn't get it, Lisa said. She thinks this is something that can be explained away. Should I respond? David asked. Robert held up his hand. Not yet. We need to handle this through proper channels. I'll contact our legal counsel first thing Monday morning. Maya looked around at the adults. Can I say something? Of course, sweetheart, Lisa said. I know this is about Katie and what she did wrong, but I keep thinking about something else. What if we hadn't been able to do anything about this? What if we were just a regular family with no power to fight back? How many other families has she treated this way who just had to accept it? The room fell silent. Maya had put her finger on the most important question of all. You're absolutely right, David said finally. This isn't just about punishing Katie or protecting our company. This is about making sure no other family has to go through what we just experienced. Lisa turned away from the window. We need to do a complete audit of our practices, not just Katie, but all our agents. We need to make sure this kind of behavior isn't happening anywhere else in our organization. Robert was taking notes. I can start that process Monday. Client interviews, agent reviews, policy updates, additional training requirements. And we need to be transparent about what happened, David added. If we just quietly fire Katie and move on, we're not really solving the problem. What do you mean? Robert asked. David looked at his wife and daughter. I mean, we need to acknowledge publicly that this happened. Explain what we're doing to prevent it from happening again. And commit to being better. Maya smiled for the first time since they'd left the house showing. That's the right thing to do, Dad. Lisa came back to her seat. It's also the scariest thing to do. Admitting we have a problem like this could hurt our reputation. Our reputation should be based on how we handle problems, not on pretending we don't have them, David replied. Robert closed his notebook. So we're really doing this? Full investigation, complete transparency, public accountability? David looked around at his family and his trusted colleague. We're really doing this. As Robert gathered his materials to leave, he turned back to the Johnson family. For what it's worth, I think you're handling this exactly the right way. It takes courage to admit when something's wrong and commit to fixing it. After Robert left, David, Lisa, and Maya sat in the quiet office, processing the magnitude of what lay ahead. You know, Maya said eventually. This morning I was worried about whether we'd like that house. And now? Lisa asked. Now I'm proud of who my parents are and the company they built. Even when it's not perfect, David felt tears in his eyes. Thanks, kiddo. That means everything. Monday morning came faster than anyone expected. David arrived at Premier Real Estate Solutions an hour early, wanting to prepare for what he knew would be one of the most difficult days in his company's 15-year history. Lisa was already there, having spent most of Sunday evening reviewing client files and preparing for the conversations ahead. Any word from our attorney? David asked as he poured himself coffee in the break room. She'll be here at 9, Lisa replied. And Rob? Ert's bringing Katie in at 9:30. Maya had asked to stay home from school to be present for the meeting with Katie, but David and Lisa had convinced her that some conversations were better handled by adults. Still, her words from Saturday kept echoing in David's mind. What about other families who can't do anything about it? At exactly 9:30, Robert walked into David's office, followed by Katie Reynolds. Katie looked nervous but also defiant, as if she'd spent the weekend convincing herself that she'd done nothing wrong. Katie, David said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. Please have a seat. Katie sat down, glancing around the room at David, Lisa, Robert, and their attorney, Patricia Williams. I'm not sure why we need so many people for this conversation. This is a serious matter, Lisa said simply. We want to make sure everything is properly documented. David opened the folder containing Katie's employment records. Katie, we need to talk about what happened during the house showing on Saturday. Katie's prepared response was immediate. I think there was a misunderstanding about my approach to managing multiple clients. I was trying to be efficient with everyone's time, Idanda. Is that what you call it? David asked calmly. Let's review what actually happened. Over the next 20 minutes, David and Lisa walked through each incident from Saturday's showing. Katie's comments about the neighborhood's specific culture, her constant mentions of costs and fees, her phone conversations about those people and clients who weren't what we expected. Katie tried to defend each incident. I always discuss costs up front with clients. That's good business practice. And the phone calls were taken out of context. Lisa pulled out her phone and played the recording David had made. Katie's voice filled the room, clearly saying that the Williams family was much more what the sellers have in mind, and that they had the right connections. Katie's face went white. You recorded me without permission? In a one-party consent state, which this is, Patricia Williams interjected. The recording is completely legal. David leaned forward. Katie, do you understand what you're hearing on that recording? I was just being realistic about market conditions, Katie insisted, but her voice lacked conviction. You were engaging in housing discrimination, Lisa said firmly. You made assumptions about our family based on our race, questioned our financial qualifications without cause, and clearly indicated that you believed other clients were more suitable for the neighborhood. Katie was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her tone had changed completely. Look, I know how this sounds, but you don't understand the pressures in this business. Sellers have preferences. Neighborhoods have expectations. I was just trying to manage everyone's expectations realistically. Robert spoke up for the first time. Katie, do you remember the fair housing training you completed when you started here? The company policies you signed? Of course, but that's different. That's about not discriminating. I wasn't discriminating. I was just being honest about market realities. David felt a mix of anger and sadness. Katie, what you did on Saturday was textbook housing discrimination. You treated us differently because of our race. You made assumptions about our financial status. You suggested that other buyers would be more suitable for the community. That's not market reality, that's discrimination. Katie's defiance finally cracked. I didn't mean for it to come across that way. But it did come across that way, Lisa said. And now we have to figure out what to do about it. Patricia Williams opened her briefcase and pulled out a termination letter. Katie, your employment with Premier Real Estate Solutions is terminated effective immediately for violation of fair housing laws and company anti-discrimination policies. Katie stared at the letter. You're firing me? Yes, David said. And we'll be reporting this incident to the State Real Estate Commission. But this will ruin my career, Katie protested. Lisa's voice was steady but firm. Your actions on Saturday could have ruined our family's day, our confidence and our trust in the home buying process. More importantly, if you've treated other families this way, you may have denied them their right to equal housing opportunities. That's much more serious than one person's career. Katie signed the termination paperwork with shaking hands. As Robert escorted her out, she turned back to David and Lisa. I hope you know I'm not a bad person, she said quietly. We don't think you're a bad person, David replied. But we do think you made some very bad choices, and choices have consequences. After Katie left, the remaining team sat in David's office discussing next steps. Patricia Williams outlined the legal protections they needed to put in place, while Robert began planning the comprehensive review of all client interactions over the past 3 months. I've already identified 4 other cases that warrant follow-up, Robert said, consulting his notes. 2 families mentioned feeling like their agent wasn't taking them seriously. One complained about being shown houses below their budget without being asked, and another said their agent seemed surprised they were pre-approved for their price range. David felt sick. So this wasn't isolated. We don't know the full scope yet, Patricia said, but it's important that you're taking comprehensive action now. Lisa had been quiet during this part of the discussion, but now she spoke up. We need to do more than just fix our own company. We need to make this a learning opportunity for the entire industry. What do you mean? Robert asked. Lisa looked at David. I mean, we need to tell this story publicly. Not the details about Katie specifically, but our story. What we experienced, what we learned, and what we're doing to make sure it never happens again. David nodded slowly. A public statement? More than that. I'm talking about speaking at industry conferences, sharing our experience with other real estate companies, maybe even writing about it. If we stay quiet, we're just protecting ourselves. If we speak up, we might help prevent other families from going through what we went through. Patricia Williams looked concerned. That's admirable, but it also increases your legal exposure. Publicly acknowledging discrimination in your company could invite lawsuits. Let them come, David said. We'd rather deal with lawsuits than let this kind of behavior continue in our industry. Over the following weeks, Premier Real Estate Solutions implemented sweeping changes. They instituted monthly diversity and inclusion training for all agents. They created an anonymous reporting system for both clients and staff to report concerns. They established a diverse client advisory board to review company practices and policies. Most importantly, they began reaching out to every family who had worked with Katie over the past 3 months. Some conversations were difficult. One Hispanic family confirmed that they had felt discriminated against, but hadn't known how to address it. An Asian American family said they'd assumed Katie's treatment was normal for the area. David and Lisa personally apologized to each family and offered to help them find new agents or continue their home search with different representation. Several families chose to work with other Premier agents, while others decided to go with different companies entirely. The most meaningful conversation was with the Rodriguez family, who had been looking for homes in the same neighborhood where the Johnsons had toured that Saturday. We knew something felt wrong, Mrs. Rodriguez explained during their meeting. But we thought maybe we were being too sensitive. When you called and explained what happened, it made sense. Mr. Rodriguez added, the worst part was that our daughter started to believe that maybe we couldn't afford houses in that neighborhood. She heard the agent's comments and internalized them. David and Lisa made sure the Rodriguez family was paired with their most experienced agent, and 3 weeks later, they closed on a beautiful home 2 streets over from the one the Johnsons had originally toured. 6 months after the incident, David was invited to speak at the National Association of Realtors annual conference. His presentation was titled, When the Customer is You, a Real Estate Owner's Experience with Discrimination in His Own Company. The audience was quiet as David shared the story, including audio clips from the recording he'd made that Saturday morning. When he finished, the questions came fast and furious. How do you prevent agents from hiding discriminatory attitudes during training? One agent asked. You can't, David replied honestly. But you can create systems that make it easier for clients to report problems, and you can respond quickly and decisively when issues arise. Aren't you worried about the negative publicity? Another questioned. Lisa, who was co-presenting, answered that one. We were more worried about the negative impact on families who deserved better treatment. Our reputation should be based on how we handle problems, not on pretending they don't exist. After the presentation, dozens of real estate professionals approached David and Lisa to share their own stories and ask for advice on implementing similar policies in their companies. One older agent, a white woman who had been in the business for 30 years, was particularly memorable. I never thought I was discriminatory, she said quietly. But listening to your story, I realized I've probably said and done things that made families feel unwelcome without even realizing it. Thank you for making me think harder about my own behavior. The Johnson family never did buy that house in Oakwood Hills. Instead, they found a different property in a neighborhood with more diversity and a welcoming community culture. Maya graduated from a high school where she felt valued and supported, and she's now studying business and social justice in college. Katie Reynolds left the real estate industry entirely after the state commission suspended her license for 6 months. According to mutual acquaintances, she's working in retail management now and has reportedly become an advocate for workplace diversity training. Premier Real Estate Solutions didn't just survive the scandal, it thrived. Their commitment to fair housing practices attracted clients who valued ethical business practices. Their agents, knowing they worked for a company that would support them in doing the right thing, became more confident in challenging discriminatory requests from sellers or pushing back against neighborhood preferences. Most importantly, the company's story inspired industry-wide conversations about discrimination in real estate. Several major firms adopted similar training and reporting systems, and the local real estate board implemented new requirements for ongoing fair housing education. On the 1-year anniversary of their experience with Katie, the Johnson family drove by the house in Oakwood Hills. It was still for sale, though the price had dropped significantly. "Think we should make an offer?" Maya joked from the backseat. David and Lisa laughed. "I think we're happy where we are," Lisa said. "Besides," David added, "we've got more important work to do." Maya smiled, thinking about the family business she'd soon be joining and the values that would guide her work. "Yeah, we do." The house they'd ended up buying was smaller than the Oakwood Hills property, but it was in a neighborhood where they were welcomed from day one. Their neighbors brought casseroles when they moved in, invited them to block parties, and treated Maya like she'd always lived there. Sometimes the best outcomes come from the worst experiences. David often told people who asked about their story. They'd set out to buy a house and ended up transforming their industry instead. And that, he believed, was a much better investment than any piece of real estate could ever be.